Hey, security peeps, we are back again in the Breaking Into Cybersecurity webinar here today with my co-host, Chris Foulon. Say hi to everyone, Chris.
Hey,
And
everyone.
our special, amazing guest, Cornelius George.
How are you?
Say hi to everyone. Awesome. We are excited to have you here today because you've already shared with us a little bit about your background, which is pretty fascinating.
Yep.
And we can't wait to jump in. So just so everyone knows, we are here during this webinar series, Breaking Into Cybersecurity, because we want everyone who is new in the industry to learn from folks who are newer in the industry. So we specifically focus on people who've broken into the industry within the last 5 years so that they can give advice and pointers and tips to all of the new folks that are coming into the industry right now. So Cornelius, talk to us, tell us how you broke in, what made you get into the cybersecurity field, like give us your story.
So first of all, thank you guys for having me. This is a great opportunity for me to share the story, and I hope that someone can learn some things from here and help figure out, where they need to go and then how they need to get into the industry. But I think the most important thing I hope you take away from this is that if you want to, you can. If you want to, you can, and that's the most important part. Is just figuring out your pathway, and it's going to be different. So my pathway is really long, right? It actually started when I was in high school. There was a guy that was a friend of mine that was actually, this was like in the late 90s, right? So the internet wasn't as big of a thing as it is right now, and companies weren't really sure how they were going to utilize the internet. There was a guy that I was friends with in high school that was actually working on the network for Hershey Foods. And, he used to come home, I went to boarding school, so he used to come home and show me all kinds of cool things that he was doing. And I was hooked, right? And back then, the internet was kind of not as protected. As things weren't as protected as they are now. So we would play little games and find little glitches here, little bugs here, and do some crazy things. And it was exciting to me because it felt like magic, right? It felt like something that was magical that was happening. But I'm a kid from Philly, so when I graduated high school, I went straight into business school, right? Because that was the thing you did, right? You from the Northeast, you go to business school, and there wasn't a lot of computer science programs out there, and the job pathways were not as robust as they are now. So, I took that pathway and went into business school, and after graduating, I went on to work for one of your large Wall Street firms. And spend about 11, I can't remember the number, but a bunch of years in that industry. Always having a foot in cybersecurity as a passion and things that I cared about, and always reading up about this and about that, and just trying to figure out things that were going on. And, eventually I got to the point where, it was about what I want to do for the rest of my life. I was in my late 30s, starting to figure out that, my bones are starting to hurt from football and all this other stuff. So let's not let my mental hurt as well. So what do, right? So I ended up leaving that industry. And what happened, though, is that I realized quickly that I spent all those years in that industry creating networks and people in that industry, in that world. I knew no one in technology. I didn't know where I was going. And also, while my passion for cybersecurity and all things tech stayed, my skill sets stayed as well in 1999, that era, right? So I didn't know what I was doing. Ironically and fortunately and unfortunately at the same time, 3 days after I left that industry, I tore up my quad tendon. It was a major industry, so I was bedridden a little bit. Which I couldn't go anywhere. So that left me with a lot of time to try to figure out exactly how I was going to get into this industry, what I needed to do, and how I needed to hack it. And, I took some time and started, learning some basics, right? So I took some Udemy courses on A+ and some of those little things right there. So I can try to at least, because I knew I wasn't going to make the technical gap up that fast, right? But I was going to make up enough of a gap where my skill sets were in development, marketing, sales, and those types of things. And that's what I've been doing for 13 years, to the point where I was, regional vice president for the bank division of a brokerage firm, right? So I've been front facing and facing clients and those types of things for a long time. So how do I take that skill sets and transfer it into something that'll help me get into this industry? And, like I said, I wasn't going to go straight technical right away. That wasn't where my skill sets are. Even now, my skill sets are not ever going to be where I'm going to be hands-on keyboard 24/7. I have that business background, so I'm more in the consulting type phase, and that's where I'm going to be probably moving into, and that's where my career is going to lie. But anyway, so it took some time while I was doing that, and while I was bedridden and things like that, and took some Udemy courses, took some Code Academy courses, try to figure out if I wanted to try to become more technical. Nah, I'm not that good at that. So try to figure out where I fit in. And, while I was doing that, as I was doing that, I found a really good cybersecurity company that's nationally known that was right in my backyard. As I was reading stuff, I read about some stuff that they had been doing with the FBI, and that was Rook Security, the company I work for now. And so I phoned them, found some stuff that they were doing, and I was like, all right, I got to work for this company. I have to work for this company. Now, I'm a little bit different than some people in the sense that, like, I am laser focused, and if there's something that I want, I'm going to go get it. I'm going to have it. It has to happen. I have to manifest it, and it has to happen. And so I said, I want to work for this company. So I sent in my resume. Now, imagine the resume that you're getting, and Renee, obviously you see this a lot, but you're seeing a resume from a guy that's like a mid-level executive, right, at a bank with like 10 plus years experience in banking and this and that. Then that's coming across your desk for an entry-level position in cybersecurity. It looks weird, right? It's one of those things where it's a huge anomaly, right? Because one, that this person has too much experience for, like, you think he has too much experience for an entry-level position, but then you think he has not enough experience for any kind of mid-level position because there's no technology experience. So I lived in that anomaly range there, that weird space. And so I sent my resume out to, I would say not only Rook, but then I tried other companies. I sent my resume out, I would say probably 100, 160 times in technology. Now, if I were to take that same resume and just threw it at a bank, I'd get a job in 5 minutes, right? Because they know how to understand it. So, I decided, how do I hack this? And the way how you hack it, and this is what I would tell everyone right now. And this is my story starts to not diverge anymore. It starts to come exactly where everyone else is. It was through networking. I realized that I wanted to work at this certain company, so I had to figure out a way of networking my way and hacking my way into that company and hacking my way into the industry. And that took networking. It took me, I used my skill sets in sales and met some people in that sales environment that were able to understand what my passion was and make an introduction. Once they made that introduction, it's weird, and it's a little bit different in the regular world as you move around, that you might be able to get a job typically off of your resume. But if you want a specific company, or you want a specific role, or you want anything specific, lots of times that takes networking. That takes coming to the right people, finding the right people, having the right conversations, and telling them your story and telling them what you're trying to do. I see a question here about is certificated better, college degree field. One of the things that I did was I hacked my way in, but I didn't stop. And I have a goal for myself with each year as I'm in this industry to earn at least one certificate. And that's not necessarily I'm not one of these people that believe that paper is always king, right? Because I've been around people in academia and so on and so forth that have these plethora of degrees, but the skill sets that they have doesn't really reflect what those degrees show. And that could be a problem, especially in security. If you talk the talk and you can't walk the walk, you become, exposed as a fraud very fast. But if you're newer to the industry, there is no better way to ramp up your knowledge and your skill sets than studying for these exams and these certificates. Because if you don't have that, if you have that knowledge and then you go and start doing it in practice, it becomes that much better. But if you don't have that knowledge from the jump, ramp it up, learn it. I started. I had my goal this year to take the Security Plus. I took that in the beginning of the year, and then I started looking at where that's like kind of the basics for me, right? Where am I going to be in this industry? Where am I going to go in this industry? And then I realized that I'm probably not going to be the most technical. I'm not going the CEH route, right? That's probably not going to be where I'm going to be a fit. I'm going to be a fit more in the consulting, that type of route. And so I started to move into the CISSP. I decided to go and take that monster on, right? And in reality, I'm not going to have the letters behind my name, right? Because I don't have the 5 years experience, which I wouldn't be on the show if I did. But I am going for that because the book is. I mean, where is it? I have it somewhere around here. The book is large, and the amount of knowledge that you get from that book, I mean, that I've already gotten is invaluable. And so just by going through the process, I'm going to update myself. Right. That was a long way of answering that question.
But it was awesome. I mean, I know Chris is going to chime in because I have so many points to your point. You talk about submitting your resume hundreds of times and not getting any responses. And one of the things that I tell, especially career transitioners, it is 100% about networking. Mm-hmm. A resume that doesn't have, when you were explaining or sharing that story, it's so funny because what I usually say is, I would be confused as a recruiter if that resume came across my desk and I'm like, oh, he made a mistake and applied to this entry-level security job. Oh, I literally would think that the person made a mistake. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what managers would think too. Like, oh, how did this get in here? Okay, on to the next. Now let's focus on these other SOC analyst types and security analyst folks. So right. You're absolutely and completely right that you could send out 1,000 resumes and you wouldn't get a response that way. So networking is 100% key. And so many folks that have come on here have said that. The additional point that you made, and I know Chris is going to chime in about this too, the certifications, the studying aspect. So we talk about that all the time. Like, you're not getting, yes, you're getting it for it to say you got the cert, but it's truly getting that knowledge and understanding and doing the studying and really growing. Mm-hmm. That's where the value comes with getting and studying for the certification. So, yeah. You made such amazing points about, breaking in resumes, getting to the point where you are networking. Actually, another point that you made that a lot of folks don't do, and I teach this all the time from a career coaching perspective, is the being targeted, and you're bringing that from that business development background that you have. But I tell people all the time, focus on a handful of companies, figure out which companies you want to work for, get laser focused on those companies, understand those companies in and out. How can you be of value to those people? Figure it out, get real, network in that space. And that yields so much better results than just blasting to everywhere. So, I mean, you made some invaluable points. Chris, I know you want to jump in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in regards to unpacking some of the points, you made a point about transferable skills. A lot of people don't think about the skills that they had in their previous role, how it would be applicable. In regards to your business development skills and your sales skills, in cybersecurity, we always have to sell to the business what their risk is, as well as how to implement mitigations and to work with them in the best way. And even if you're not a technical individual like yourself, you still have to work with the business and explain to them the risks that are there, why your risks, why they need to be concerned, how it can impact their business. And even if you're not the one setting up the firewall or reading the logs or being in the SOC, you still have a part in that entire security ecosystem of that organization. And that's one of the things that I like to tell everyone is there's not just the hands-on keyboard people in security. There's the people that need to understand risk. There's the people that need to understand compliance. I know that's the dirty word in security, but it's still a part. And talking to that business and working with that business and having those sales skills, you're always selling something to someone at some time. It's very important.
Yeah. So like there's a book call Everybody Sells or something like that, right? In reality, majority of the conversations you're having in every role, right, being somewhat skilled in this in the skills, I guess, if you will, of sales, is important all the way around. And that's not, the typical, Willie Loman, death of a salesman type, used car salesman type of person, right? But it's more or less in the idea that, you have to influence people. You're always influencing people, and you're always, taking feedback and being empathetic and understanding what people need and trying to figure out, as you work through all these things, you try to figure out how to help people in different ways. And those skills transfer over into every aspect. When it comes to security, especially, I think there's a great book, and that's another thing I do all the time. I mean, right now I'm studying for the CISSP, so I don't have enough time to do that. But, I'm a 3 to 4 book a month guy. And that's audiobooks, that's Kindle, that's whatever it is. I'm reading and reading and reading and reading. I'm reading about cybersecurity. I'm reading about sales. I'm reading about people. I'm reading about everything. I'm just throwing knowledge in my head as quickly as possible and as much as possible. I'm not going to retain all of it, but if I retain 60% of it, that's more than I had, 60% more than I had before, type of thing. So, but great book I read a little while ago was The Phoenix Project, and I talk about this book all the time, right? And it talks about, it helped me really see cybersecurity and DevOps and technology in a whole and just structures and businesses in a whole different way. And I think in cybersecurity, what's happening now is the shift is that I don't think that you have to be the hands-on keyboard type of person anymore to be in the industry. I don't think that you can be just the hands-on key. Unless you're really, really good, yes, you can. You can do whatever you want to do. If you're a golden child, you can do whatever you want to do. But I think it's more or less coming to the point where, especially from the corporation and the business side of it, that businesses are realizing that cybersecurity is not just this place where you tuck all the nerds, if you will, right? You know what I mean? And tell them to go play with their nerd machine and play wizardry and make stuff work, right? It's integral to a business. And in reality, businesses are realizing that, they're in the cybersecurity business by virtue of the fact that if something happened to those, in 2018, if you're in business and you're not on the internet, if you will, you're either a funeral home, right? I mean, pretty much, or you're not in business, right? And so, those companies are all online. They're doing everything online. So therefore, for them to generate revenue, they need to make sure that the data is protected. They need to make sure that the network is protected, that they have a system that is secured. And so how do you secure that system? You secure that system via cybersecurity. So therefore, the business that you're really in is cybersecurity. You just don't realize it. And that's the most important aspect of your business, because if certain systems go down, you make no money. Nobody gets paid. No bonuses, right? So I think that's what's happening. What the evolution of the industry is that people are starting to realize that more and more. And I think, that takes diverse mindsets to really truly come in and say, okay, I see this from this way. You see it from this way. Let's figure out how we can come together and make both of those viewpoints work out to solve this problem. And I think that's where the industry's going. That's where I like to be in that industry, in the industry. And that's kind of, to your point, it's no longer a place where you can just do one thing. You have to kind of, branch out a little bit and then utilize what skill sets you have to get you in the industry and bring those skill sets in. And you know what? Help other people see the value of that, right? Because I have a different set of skill sets than most people have ever met. In security, right? But that means I bring a diverse viewpoint, and so therefore they bring a viewpoint before, and it helps us all come together to have a good dialogue.
Absolutely. Chris, you have the question?
I was going to say diversity. I mean, diversity is so important to this industry, both from viewpoints, from cultural standpoints, the way you approach certain things, even neurodiversity, introverts versus extroverts, the way that you interact with different people is definitely critical. And because your organization is interacting with that diverse population on the front end, if you don't have that population on the back end, you will be either excluding those groups or creating vulnerabilities for yourself because those groups interact with your organization in a different way. You're just creating holes for yourself if you don't think in that same mindset as well.
So the way how I've come to understand it is the difference between like security through obscurity and open sourcing, right? Diversity is open sourcing thought processes, right? If you have just the same mind, same background of people, same everything of people that are looking at a system, you have a closed, obscured system, and really, it might work for a while, but in reality, there's so many gaps that you're not looking at, right? And there might be so many gaps that you're not looking at. Whereas, if you're open source, you have a lot of different diverse backgrounds, mindsets, thought processes, attitudes, everything. Man, you're going to see people poking holes at this thing from every way, and you're going to come up with the best possible product, system, whatever the case may be. So I definitely agree with that.
Wholeheartedly agree. I mean, I'll chime on and say diversity of thought. Everything that you said is what I preach. So ditto, absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead, Chris.
So you mentioned that you studied for the certifications, and you also mentioned implementing your knowledge. What's some of the ways that you, from your background, tried to implement or operationalize the knowledge that you gained from studying for those certifications?
Yes, yeah. So that's really a great question. So being in sales, right, and being the front of house for a security company, one of the things that happens is, and you'll see this, and there's a huge dialogue right now going on between the relationship between security vendors and people that buy in the industry, right? One of the issues that I have, and I know people have it too, is that there are salespeople in security, right? But there are very few security salespeople, if that makes sense, right? And so what I try to implement is the idea that I don't know as much as you know, Mr. and Mrs. CISO, right? But I know enough to understand really truly what the conversation is that we're having. And I know enough to understand how maybe there's some things that I can bring to the table and help you understand your systems a little bit better, and understanding what is really going on in the industry. You can't do that by just reading your product manuals and stuff like that, and your SKU guides or whatever the case may be. You have to truly understand what's really going on in the industry and be a student of the game. So from that standpoint, in my day-to-day, can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, from that standpoint, in my day-to-day, that's something that I utilize in my current role, right? And that helps me learn more and be able to have more robust, complex conversations that, if it gets too technical, I have some great team members that I can bring in there and we can have those conversations. But I know enough to have a high level, real detailed conversation about what the goals and what the strategies of an organization really are, right? That helps me in that regard. What I also do for myself is, and I think we talked a little bit about this, is I'm passionate about technology, cybersecurity, and bringing that to the masses, right? So what I try to do with that is, they say the best way to learn is to teach, right? And so, I started a kind of a digital media company, and I'm rolling it out slowly here, hopefully by the end of the month. But I've had a couple episodes called TechSplain. Now, the reason behind that is because the term TechSplain is kind of like a derogatory term that it's not used that much, but it's kind of like on the same line of like mansplaining, right? When you're trying to talk down to people, and people in tech do that a lot. We do that a lot, right? We do that a lot when we're talking to the average public, right? The number one cause of failure is user error, right? And all those different things. And so it's kind of like this, but we can help people understand this stuff more rather than just being like, this is our club, you can't get in until you pass these blah, 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 blah. So I want to try to take the knowledge that I'm learning and the fact that I still have mind not completely into that world, into this industry. I'm not so, I guess, that I can now translate some of the stuff that I'm learning into common speak and help the common people understand that this stuff is not that difficult, right? And so I started, it's called Tech Explaining, and I started that a little while ago and rolling that out more and more and trying to get more content and more people to kind of talk about, you know, some of those things and bring it down to people. And then the other thing that I do is, you know, I'm sitting in my basement kind of pseudo lab, if you will. You know, I have a couple of, I have some stuff here that I have some stuff here that, you know, that I've taken some classes and I'll go in and I'll tinker, right? And I'll try to figure out some things and try to learn a little bit more and try to understand a little bit more about this industry and technology as a whole. You know, one thing I would recommend too is if you really want to try to be hands on keyboard and have a little bit of fun with it, it's a great game called Hacknet. It's not. I mean, from what it's pretty good in terms of a simulation, and you do some really cool stuff. But it's a great game that you can play and you can kind of work and you start understanding some of the stuff that goes into the coding and all that other stuff for compromising systems, and then understand what you need to do to protect the system from being compromised. So I would say play games. You know, utilize it in my work. Try to have these conversations with people on a regular basis, and you know, and try to be a good ambassador for the industry as a whole.
Such valid points. I mean, everything that you talked about in terms of, well, what's really, really funny, I see this all the time on LinkedIn in particular, is the whole vendor CISO relationship or vendor security people relationship. And it totally cracks me up. Like, I laugh all the time, and vendors get upset about being called vendors. I mean, it's just so comical to me. And then, you know, the CISO's like, they don't, you know, nobody answers their phone. They get a zillion phone calls because everybody has like the hot new thing that's going to stop you from getting hacked here, right?
Yeah.
You know, so it's just so funny. So the point that you brought up about being in the industry, understanding, learning, being able to talk high level, you know, you'll never be, you don't proclaim to know what they know. That's not your purpose, right? Yeah. That's not the goal. So having that, again, diversity of thought, being able to bring various things to the table is definitely needed and useful. And I could see why you would do so. I can see why you'd be amazing at being in the role that you're in, because you're bringing that to the table, and you're not trying to, you know, even with the podcast that you're starting, you know, you're not talking down to people. It's just like, okay, this is not rocket science. My former director, he used to say this all the time. The man is so amazing. He would say, none of this stuff is rocket science. Like, I can break every piece of it. Like, there's a handful of it that is, but you don't have to go get like an MD degree and, you know, a JD and all this stuff to be in security. You don't, you know.
Nice. It's like us. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I would say it's like Steve Jobs once famously said, right? You know, something along the lines of, and I'm going to butcher this really bad, but the greatest thing that happens to you is when you realize that most of the stuff that was built in this world was built by people no smarter than you, or something like that, right? And that's it, right? It's not rocket science. Like, if you know, if this person can do it, you can do it,
right?
That, and some of the points that you brought out, it's definitely important to speak at an individual level. So if you're trying to work with a business to have them improve their security posture, you have to talk in their lingo. You have to talk the way they talk, the way they understand things. You have to break things down the way that they do it. And then another point I wanted to touch on that you brought up with regards to practicing in your lab, similar to that game Hacknet, if you go to local conferences or meetups, they have capture the flag type events, which allow you to interact with other individuals there and operationalize your skills and techniques with regards to finding vulnerabilities and things like that. So if that's an area that you want to go into, definitely check that out. But there's definitely lots of resources to keep on learning, growing. I know I have a list of RSS feeds, podcasts, books that those who are interested, they can check out. But I love your approach. Read books, listen to podcasts, try to learn all the time.
Yeah, and you brought up another really great point that I want to make sure that I definitely highlight so that we don't skip over. I've been, like I said, I came from the world of finance, and then dealing with that community is one thing. This is probably the greatest community, industry community I've ever seen. I mean, I've seen a lot. I've looked at different industries. Greatest industry community I've ever seen. And the truth of the matter is that, like you said, right, there's meetups, right? When you go to these things, right, so you have to understand, and when I say nerd, like, obviously I'm talking about reading 3-4 books a month. Like, I'm a nerd, right? Like, this not even a question. So I've always been a nerd, right? But you have to understand, nerd culture is always about, let's help people. Let's figure out some really cool stuff. Let's do something. And that's what cybersecurity is really based upon, right? It's based upon nerd culture. And so what you have is people dying to help you get information. And I mean, so, there's different OWASP chapters, the ISSA, meetups. You go on meetups right now, you'll find 4 or 5 in your area that you can just go. Or the different conferences, just go and start talking to people. I mean, I've gone to a lot of these conferences, and have met some people that are going to be friends for life, right? And had dinner with some incredible people and listened to stories. I was at a conference, and like, we get done with the conference, and the speaker and I and a couple other people start talking, and they're telling stories. Now, I don't know none of this stuff because I wasn't around back in the 70s, right? But they're telling all these stories of like how this came to be, and this and that, and what the internet was, and all this stuff, and how security. And we sat there. We went to a Starbucks for 4 hours just talking. I never met these guys before in my life, right? And we're having these great long conversations. So I would say, and that's what you're highlighting there, is that like this community is based upon the fact that people have so much knowledge that if you show interest and want to get that knowledge from them, someone's going to give it to you. And so you just have to step out of your shell and say, I want this, and go ask. I have people coming up to me now, and asking me, hey, I want to get in the industry. What can I do? And I'm like, huh? Yeah, here's some things. And, there's, I've worked with, and I've talked to a couple people, a lot of people through LinkedIn. I've linked up with Chris Roberts. Has been a great help in giving me some information and stuff like that. And that's a guy that's like at the top of the industry, right? And he's like, I'm like, hey, listen, I have someone that's trying to help. Can you help? Here's a list of things that they need to do. Here's this. Here's these resources. Here's resource, right? And that's what I'm talking about. That's a great industry. You can't do that in finance. I can't call Jamie Dimon, who's at the top of the industry in banking, and say, hey, Jamie, help me out. Not going to happen. But in cybersecurity, it's just accessibility and these people that are dying to help you out that, like you just have to ask for these questions. And like I said, if you have some questions, believe me, I've been working. I have resources that I've gotten from these people myself. And so if you want some resources, my LinkedIn link, it's a lot of links. My LinkedIn link is right up top there. Just connect with me and ask me, man. I'd love to help you out. Because I mean, I had to do a lot of it myself and had to figure it out myself. And the best ideas in the world are the ones that you steal from other people. So steal my ideas.
Awesome. Well, Cornelius, with that, we are going to wrap. It is 33 minutes after 12. So we want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Thank you so much for such an engaging and awesome discussion. I love your background, love what you're doing. Please give the link to your podcast so that we can make sure to circulate that around as well. Yep. And make sure that when all those newbies come, you send them to us. Like, yeah,
definitely will. And thank you guys for the time, and it's been a pleasure getting to share my story and talking with you all today. So thank you, and I hope someone gets some help out of this.
Yeah, excellent. And next week, guys, we will have, who do we have coming up next week? We have Pushkar. He will be here next week. And then in the month of December, we're going to have all these UMUC grads. So I'm excited to bring them on as well. So thank you all. Have a great weekend and a great week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.